Before we get to the meat of today's video, I want to mention that I was totally unaware of the controversy surrounding this until rewatching and researching. I believe in death of the author, or separating art from artist, and I think in this case, aside from two scenes which I'll talk about much later, it can be enjoyed without the controversy overshadowing it. I firmly believe also that everyone should have a fair chance to have my opinions on this film sort of portrayed to them. So I will not be talking about anything of the controversy until much later, and there will be a warning beforehand. I totally understand that some people, whether directly or indirectly affected by it, will not want to talk about that subject matter. So I will make sure that they have adequate warning so they're not exposed to any harmful material. So without further ado, let's talk about 1995's Powder, starring Sean Patrick Flanery, Lance Henriksen, Jeff Goldblum, Mary Steenburgen, Ray Wise and Missy Kreider. And this was so formative to me. It was February 97 when it was released in the UK, so I was just shy of 14. And even though it wasn't like, sort of an action-packed film or anything like that, it just looked like a heartwarming kind of film, I was like, yes, I want to watch this. And so I did. And from that point on, it's always had a little bit in my mind. There's so much to love about Jeremy Reed, also known as Powder, who is an unwanted albino. His dad's like, that's not my child. We see that in the first scene, which is really, really sad and heartbreaking. But his mother was struck by lightning whilst she was pregnant with him, and that passed on some weird, as well as the albinism, some weird kind of EM powers, basically. Like, he can deal with the electromagnetic spectrum in ways that no one else can. And there's so much of his sort of emotional sensitivities and things like that that you can make a lot of sense of. I mean, there's a whole scene where Jeff Goldblum's saying that we are just energy, we are electrical signals, that is all we are. So if he can manipulate and be sort of very sensitive to electrical signals in the EM spectrum, emotions could be part of that. And he could just be able to pick up what those little signals are, and he's like, you're afraid. The reading thoughts that comes later, more in detail, is a little, you'd have to really bend it. But it is, I guess this is like a science fantasy, if you want to sort of classify it in that way. There's not really much hard science in it, aside from some of the basic stuff. But the actual sort of core of what Jeremy is and what Jeremy can do is very much in the realms of fantasy. But we sort of stumble upon him when he's lost his grandparents. His granddad is the latest to die, and he's then taken into this sort of state ward building, sort of where the people who are unwanted, the kids really, the boys who are unwanted, are grouped all together. And of course, he's an outsider. This is an outsider's tale. There's echoes in this of Edward Scissorhands. If you're actually watching it really closely, the scene where he's sort of winding the window up and down, I almost expected him to headbutt it like Johnny Depp does. There's a lot of that in here where, it's this outsider trying to fit in. He's doing things that he thinks people will find cool, like the trick with the spoon being a huge magnet. And I've never seen a spoon look so menacing as that one that flips out of the drawer. They did really well with that. But what he thinks he needs to do to fit in isn't. He learns that humanity thrives on deception, hiding things through gentle white lies all the way up to big, black, awful lies. But no one is pure and true to themselves. No one realizes. There's a scene that, like I've said, this film is very much important to me growing up. And if one scene gave me the core message, it was about an hour and 20 minutes in, when he sat with Lindsay at the fair and he's saying how
they're part of absolutely everyone. And everything.
Everything. I'm part of this tree. Part of Zach barking over fences. You're telling me that I'm part of some fisherman in Italy on some ocean I've never even heard of?
But we just have this thing that just stops us doing that. It's a block to us. And, like, we're all beautiful. We all have the potential to just be open and honest with each other and live a truthful life. And that is just so beautiful and poignant that even a 13-year-old me was like, yes, I get it. But we have things like Deputy Harley Duncan, massive proponent of guns and hunting. He loves kind of going out and killing things. We get hints through dialogue that he's also kind of racist when Lance Henriksen's character of the sheriff says, how can there be a guy who's too white for you? So we get that hint that he is very, very racist. He's just the typical bad sort of small town cop. But a scene when, he's taking the boys hunting, again, he shouldn't have done it, but he says it's a clean kill, it's not going to suffer, but then Powder shows him that it's suffering through just connecting the two, through relaying those electrical signals. And from that moment in the film, he goes gunless. The scene at the end, even when they're trying to sort of corral him, it closely shows him getting out of the car, and you see there is no gun in his holster. And that's the second core message, I think, of this film. People can change, no matter how ingrained some of these prejudices and some of these incorrect assumptions are. People can still come good. But one of the greatest parts of this film, is the fact that this is just a young man who's just trying to carry on in the world. He's just trying to fit in, even though he's very unusual. Like I say, it's the outsider's tale. And to any of us who've ever felt like an outsider, and to be honest, that's probably everyone during that time of life as well. You may see the popular people, but all of them are probably feeling that they're I don't know, it's kind of like imposter syndrome. There's going to be a few, and they're probably, clinical narcissists, but for the most part, people do not feel like they fit in a lot because we have that block. Maybe. We have the thing that says that we are all connected, blocked off because society teaches us, no, you've got to look after yourself. It's what leads to weird mentalities of thinking that wearing certain face coverings makes you a sheep, for argument's sake. But we see at the end, after he's touched these people's lives, that he's ready to just go. He's too pure for this world. This film is the too pure for this world sort of, textbook almost. And he's too beautiful, too pure for this world, and he just runs off and gets, zapped by lightning and sort of explodes weirdly. But I've always said that if you just impact one person's life positively, you've done a good job. We see him at the end impacting 4 very directly. He's giving them a new lease of life, as we see from Jeff Goldblum's character earlier on. Just touching him gave him that energy, that youthful vigour. It's just a beautiful tale of how to find beauty in everything, how to learn that we're all part of this big tribe called humanity. If we just allow ourselves to look past our differences, we'd see that there's a heck of a lot more similarities. But this film was that most beautiful thing to me. It was something that just said, yeah, pay attention to this. This is a good lesson for life. And even through some of my darkest times, I've held it in the back of my mind. That if I could just get rid of some of these issues, I could be better as a member of humanity. But we can't look at this film in isolation after I found out what I found out. So just as a quick overview of what I've just said. So yeah, this film is beautiful, teaches us that we're all connected, and that's great. Even the most outside person can be one of the greatest things for humanity, in a way. But here is your, I guess, trigger warning of sorts for anything related to child abuse, particularly sexual. If that's a thing that you don't want to hear anything about, and I'm not going to go into gory detail, don't worry. But if it's something you do not want to hear about, go with my blessing, that's fine. Thank you very much for sitting through my thoughts on the film. But now, like I say, I've got to talk some horrible subject matter. So this was written and directed by Victor Salva, which I didn't say up front because I'm not giving him credit. He was convicted in 1988 on a few counts that related to an encounter, I think is the most delicate way to put it, with a 12-year-old who had worked on a film of his. That was Nathan Forrest Winters. I don't believe in erasing victims here, or survivors, whichever term you prefer. He starred in Clown House, and he also had a lot of material, should we say, video and photographic material that was also seized. Now, he did get sentenced to 3 years, and he had a parole period which ended in 1992. Now, no one was aware of this on Powder, from like Disney execs, because Buena Vista was the distributor, until about halfway through production. A lot of the material had been done, and Mr. Winters had come forward and said, we should boycott this film because this guy is awful. There's also been things since, because I didn't realise he did Jeepers Creepers as well, which I also kind of liked. And there was a whole issue with Rose McGowan in a film that she did with him, how she said at one point, well, it's none of my business, but then tried to wind it back. But I'm not getting into the politics of Hollywood here. But this is one of those things where, like I say, you cannot take that out of what was happening here. There are 2 scenes, like I say, that once I knew this, I saw them in a very different light. There is the scene with Jeff Goldblum when, sort of he's feeling all, no one sort of touched me or anything like that. My grandparents got scared. And basically you've got an adult saying, oh no, you didn't have adults touching you. And I don't know, it maybe is a bit more reachy than the other one, but it almost felt a little like, look, I'm trying to normalise that touching kids is fine. And it's obviously not. I mean, it's meant to be played off, I'm sure, as just a human connection. So whoever looked at the script didn't jump to that conclusion, granted. And before this information, I always just saw it as a moment of human connection. But again, it's where you've got to exercise death of the author versus acknowledging what it was. The other big one was very much towards the end. There's a shot of one of the kids who he's taking his t-shirt off, he's wet it, and he's sort of dripping it over himself, and there's a lingering shot down his body. Now again, contextually, Powder's like, you have body hair, there's hair in your armpits. But, and obviously I'm sure the actor was over 18 at the time, I hope so, but there is that almost, I don't know, dare I say, pervy quality to it, where you've got lingering down a young body. And there's a whole scene with, him being naked at the end, but that's done from a place of, like, awful kids being awful to each other and to him. So I don't really count that quite in the same way. But those 2 were very, very, very difficult scenes to really just take the context out of Victor Salva's indiscretions, shall we say. But I can still enjoy it, like I say. I still understand the message underneath. We are all connected, and that doesn't necessarily mean that, it's fine to just, molest anyone or anything like that. It's saying that we could all just be a lot nicer to each other if we can understand that, and maybe part of that is not doing something awful like you did, Mr. Salva. But I don't want to talk too much more about it. I just want to say that, yes, I acknowledge it, and I know that there's probably more that I didn't really pick up on in this film, aside from those 2 scenes. But it is an awful thing to think about, and it still doesn't detract from the film. I still enjoy this film for what it is, and maybe I won't watch it again, but I'll still take the message with me. And I think that's the important thing here. But that's all I want to say on Powder, and some things I didn't really want to say about Powder. But next time I'm going to be doing something very different. Let's just say I'm protecting you guys from getting scammed. So with that weird mystery in the air, I'll leave it there. So until next time, thank you for watching, and as always, take care.